Welcome. We're really happy to have you here with us today for the third webinar in our Introducing AEPS-3 series. I'm Amy Klaus, Marketing Manager at Brooks Publishing, and I'm very happy to have Dr. Jennifer Grisham and Christy Kaylor with me today to talk about the AEPS-3 curriculum. So before we start, I just have a couple tips for you as you listen to the webinar today. So Jennifer, you could go one slide forward for me. We recommend you close any applications that take up bandwidth just for a better viewing experience. There are slide handouts that are in the handout section of your webinar, and there's a URL in the chat box if you'd like to download the handouts. And we'll take questions at the end of the webinar. So as you're listening today, you can type those into the question panel of the webinar panel, and we'll take them at the end. So one more slide, please. We do have a survey. So we really like to hear feedback and ideas for future webinars. So if you fill out our survey, we'll be selecting one winner to win a free book. And then there will also be a certificate. So if you're listening live, there's a certificate in the handout section of the panel. And one will also be emailed to you tomorrow after the webinar. And if you're watching the recording, we're going to share a URL at the end of the webinar. So you'll be able to access your certificate that way. And now I'm happy to introduce our presenters. So Dr. Jennifer Grisham is professor in the interdisciplinary early childhood education program at the University of Kentucky, Lexington. She is also faculty director of the Early Childhood Laboratory at the University of Kentucky, which is an inclusive early childhood program for children birth to 5 years of age. Dr. Grisham directed research projects on topics including linked assessment and instruction, early care and education, program quality, and individualizing instruction for young children with disabilities. And she's frequently asked to provide professional development to state departments of education, universities, and local education agencies. She's a co-author of the new AEPS-3 and directed the nationwide field test for the new edition. Christy Kaylor attended the University of Kentucky for undergrad and graduate school for interdisciplinary early childhood education. And after teaching in the public school system for a year, she has been at the Early Childhood Laboratory as a preschool lead teacher since August 2006. She participated in the AEPS-3 Curriculum Validation Study during the spring semester of 2021, using the new multi-tiered framework with her classroom of 3- and 4-year-olds. So welcome, Jennifer and Christy. We're really happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Amy. We're happy to be here, and I'm especially happy to be co-presenting with Christy, who is one of the finest early childhood teachers I've ever had the pleasure of working with. And so I think you'll gain more knowledge probably from hearing from her than from me. Our objectives for today are to provide you with an overview of the AEPS curriculum, including its foundations and how it connects to the AEPS test. We're going to describe how you can use the AEPS-3 curriculum to help implement a multi-tiered system of support. And we're going to highlight the process of using the AEPS curriculum and how it supports the implementation of recommended practices for children with and without disabilities. So I'll go on and get started then. The AEPS curriculum is a multi-tiered system of support curriculum that emphasizes blended practices for children with and without disabilities. As some of you all know, if you've been AEPS users for a while, the AEPS was really initially designed for children with disabilities. But since the second edition was published, we've been doing a lot of work around supporting its use in programs for children with and without disabilities. It also supports the notion of activity-based intervention in that we are talking about embedding the skills from the AEPS into activities and routines in which children spend time. The curriculum is divided into 3 levels. Many of you all will remember that the AEPS does not have age scores on the test items. However, in order to guide instruction better, we divided the curriculum into 3 broad developmental levels. The first being beginning, which is for children that are birthed to 18 months of age, developmentally. And then for growing, the age span is from 18 months to 3 years developmentally, and ready would be for children that are 3 to 6 years developmentally. And we emphasize the word developmentally because we want folks to understand that if they have a child that is chronologically older but developmentally is functioning like a younger child, they can still use the corresponding curriculum for that child's development. As I mentioned, the AEPS curriculum reflects current practices or best practices for using early childhood programs, for use in early childhood programs that emphasizes working with children with and without disabilities. It emphasizes providing instruction within natural environments for children, for folks who are working with children in home-based settings and early intervention. It emphasizes a multi-tiered system of support that provides knowledge and support for how to provide universal, focused, or tier 2, or individualized supports for children. It's organized around routines and activities that can fit into the structure of a classroom, whether you're teaching an infant toddler classroom in a center-based program, you're working with families in a home-based situation, or you're working in a preschool or kindergarten that is set up around classroom centers around different curricular areas. It helps you to determine what outcomes that you want to teach all the children in your program, some children, and then individual children. And it also has guidance on progress monitoring, which is, of course, something that all teachers have difficulty with. And so we provide a structure for how to think about how much data you need to collect, depending on the kind of instruction that you are providing to children. As mentioned, it is a multi-tiered system of support. And so this is the framework that we use in the AEPS curriculum. As with other multi-tiered system of the support, we have the foundation, which is tier 1, for providing universal support to children. This is the type of instruction that all children need, or the type of caregiving that all children need in order to be successful in the environments in which they spend time. Then we build upon that base by providing either focused and or specialized support, or tier 3 support. Tier 2 support being for children, some children who need additional or extra help on components of outcomes or goals that they are working on. And tier 3 being support that children need, where we are delivering evidence-based strategies for young children. We really emphasize in the AEPS curriculum that, tier 3 is not just for children with disabilities, and that children with disabilities don't just necessarily need tier 3 support, and that all children need tier 1 support. So building upon the notions and building upon the recommendations of our professional organization, the Division of Early Childhood, we've tried to build a, we've tried to build a framework that matches current thinking about MTSS. The routines and activities that are included in each of the volumes of the curriculum include these 18 activities and routines. And as you look at those, you'll see that there are routines that could occur in home or in a center-based program. The words or titles might not be exactly what you do in your particular program or with the families with which you work. However, the items that in the structure of the activity is set up so that they can work, if you will, in other situations. And an example I might give you here is that, field trips is not necessarily something that families do with their children necessarily, but they do go on outings with their children. And so we try to set this up so that it can work across environments. And then, of course, we've tried to address all of the major curricular areas that you would work on with children that are between the ages of birth and 6 years of age. This is what some of the print material is going to look like. So within the 3 curricular levels or areas, if you will, you're going to find a set of material that corresponds with each of the activities and routines. And so within each of those activities or routines, there will be an introduction to the activity, what types of materials that you might use in art in the example here, what the skill areas are or the developmental areas are that you would focus on within that routine. Then secondly, you would see the concurrent skills. And the concurrent skills are the skills from the AEPS test that can be embedded into that particular routine. There also are statements here of the embedded learning opportunities. So how can you specifically provide guidance on how to teach a specific skill within whatever routine that you've identified for teaching? So in the example here, these are all fine motor skills, and example embedded learning opportunities are rotating wrist to twist off a cap for an art material, holding a glue stick while pulling off the lid, grasping art utensils to write or draw on paper. So that information gives very specific guidance about how you can intentionally embed those skills within those routines. Also, within those routines, you're going to see suggestions for how to provide universal support, focus support, which is what we call Tier 2, and specialized support, which is what we call Tier 3. And so just to provide a little bit of an overview about how we define in the AEPS curriculum, Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 practices. Universal support, the strategies that we talk about within the universal components are using hands-on materials, activities that are interest to the child, developing a high-quality social and physical learning environment for the child, supporting and promoting social interactions between children and between adults and children. And then some of the instructional support practices that we talk about include language modeling, using open-ended questions, and there will be suggestions for the types of questions that you might ask a child within a routine, providing repetition, using self and parallel talk, and introducing new vocabulary. And that vocabulary would be defined. So there's a great deal of effort within the curriculum on the notion that the universal part of the universal level or tier of instruction is very, very important to children's overall development, and that regardless of what additional support or additional instruction the child needs, we need a strong foundation on which to build other levels of instruction. At Tier 2, what we call focused instruction, we're looking at providing additional opportunities for practice for a child who is struggling or whose development is stalled at a developmental level, providing specific adaptations and modifications such as increased time, shortening activities, providing visual schedules for various activities or routines, and identifying special equipment that are going to support them. For example, a child who may be struggling with being able to hold a writing implement with a strong enough grasp so that they can actually practice writing, then we might add a pencil grip to the child's crayon or marker or pencil so that the child can write with increased force, if you will. We also talk under focused instruction, we talk about the formation of intentional small groups, different ways that you can develop small groups so that you're addressing a group of children, for example, that are all working on the same AEPS skill. Or maybe they're all working on early writing, but they each have a different goal. Or maybe you're working with children on completely different skills within that activity. So how do you set up those activities so that you can intentionally provide instruction during them? We talk in Tier 2 about peer modeling and also about scaffolding, which we define as being providing sort of intermittent or providing support as needed for a child, regardless, depending on what level of support that they need at any given point during an activity. And so these strategies are defined in the overview of each of the manuals, but they're also specific ideas about focused teaching strategies are identified within each of the routines. So in other words, how do you use these teaching strategies when you are implementing an art activity or a science activity, or you're going on an outing as a family? When it comes to specialized teaching strategies, we do look at some specific teaching strategies based on disability. And so if a child, for example, has a vision or hearing impairment, there will be specialized strategies that are identified for that population, or perhaps for children who have autism or intellectual disabilities. We talk about the use of clear instructional opportunities using antecedent behavior consequences. So, how do you set up a situation and intentionally teach something to a child? How do you define that behavior, and how do you consistently consequent the behavior? We talk about the use of prompts to support a child's learning, different types of prompts. And then we look at three kind of broad areas of evidence-based strategies. The first being consequent strategies for children who are learning social emotional skills or play skills, the use of naturalistic language interventions, or sometimes referred to enhanced mode teaching strategies, and the response prompting strategies such as time delay, system of least prompts, and so forth. And so the curriculum is not going to give you, it's not a how-to for how to implement these strategies. There are other books that are written on how to do that, but it does give you some general guidance about how you can implement any of these strategies within the curriculum. In addition, with each activity and routine, there are sets of resources where you can go to get some additional support for how to implement the strategies. One of the nice things that I really like about the AEPS curriculum is when you're beginning to use it, is that we've developed this very in-depth skills matrix, which gives you information about how you can locate in which activities you can teach a skill. And so if I am interested in looking at, for example, alternating feet going up and down steps, then I can go through here and see, first of all, that this occurs in the growing level. So I'm going to pull out my growing curriculum guide. And then I can see in here that I could work on that skill and there are going to be teaching suggestions for how to work on that skill during activities and outdoor routines, at arrival and departure, on field trips, during the math routine, science, sensory, and also in writing. And so it tells me exactly where I'm going to find teaching suggestions and in what activities and routines I can find specific instruction. The other thing I'll point out as we're looking at this skills matrix is that you're also going to see on here some subscripts underneath each of the goals or under some of the objectives, and it'll be like FS, and these are foundational skills. And so when we combine the AEPS test level 1 and level 2, we had a lot of items. And so to reduce the number of items that we had in the overall test, we had to pull some of those items out. And so we put them back in here for those of you who are working with children with significant disabilities, and you need to find goals or you need to find prerequisite skills for how to help that child work up toward a specific objective. These are earlier skills, if you want to think of, that you could use to teach those children. The other thing that we do is that we provide guidance on progress monitoring. And so one of the questions that we always ask ourselves when we're trying to think about, how it is that we go about, collecting so much data on children who have a variety of different needs within our classroom. We may have, especially in a classroom situation, we may have children that are typically developing, and we just need to kind of monitor their overall development. We may have some children in there sometimes that are there because somebody wants to see whether or not they're responding to interventions. And so we may have to collect progress monitoring data to see if they're responding to interventions, maybe moving toward an evaluation for special education services. We may have children in our program that have IEPs or IFSPs. And so there's a lot of different types of data that we have to collect for different purposes to answer different questions. And so what we've tried to do in the AEPS curriculum is to provide some support about how you, if you will, tier your progress monitoring efforts so that you are not collecting, data all the time that you're not going to use. And so our recommendation is, at tier one, tier one supports, we're assessing children's progress toward programmatic goals like early learning standards or the OSEP outcomes or Head Start outcomes framework. And so because the AEPS is aligned with or linked with all of those standards, then if we re-administer the entire test 2 or 3 times a year, or we look at the collection, we collect data on the goals, or we re-administer the family test or the family or the ready set, then by doing that, then we're getting a broad picture of everything that children learn during this age, and we can assess over time to see if they're making progress on all of their development. When we're looking at tier 2, what we might do is that we might re-administer select portions of the AEPS, and Christy's going to show you an example of how we did this in the field test. And so we could also use portfolios with work samples, or we could re-administer the ready set, which you all have had a webinar about that already. And then though, when we're really looking at tier 3, where we're have a skill that is a priority for a child, where we're having to implement specialized instruction, we're having to be very consistent, we're administering on a very frequent basis, then we're probably going to be using and collecting data on a much more frequent basis, 2 to 3 times a week, using counts and tallies, work samples, etc. So we do provide some specific guidance on there. People ask me sometimes, well, how often is it realistic that you re-administer the AEPS? And to re-administer the entire test with a classroom of children, is probably not going to happen more than 2 or 3 times a year. But there's different ways that you can use the AEPS to guide your progress monitoring without re-administering the entire test. So I'll talk very quickly about the decision-making process for going through implementing, and then Christy is going to share with you her experience implementing the AEPS-3 curriculum as part of our field test that we did in the spring. And so the idea is that we would, first of all, select the curriculum that matches the developmental level of the child that you're working with. So again, we've got that beginning level, that growing, or that ready level. And it is possible within a given child that you may have to use a couple of different levels. And so, if you have a child that is perhaps cognitively or in early academics, they're doing just fine, and we need to challenge them, and we need to look at more challenging ideas for how to teach them, I might go to the ready curriculum. But if that same child is having difficulty in social emotional, or they're having difficulty in social communication, then I may be using the beginning or the growing curriculum. Once I've done that, then I want to identify activities and routines that are motivating to the child, that are that the child's gonna have frequent access to. I choose those activities, and then I identify the level of support that I need to teach those skills. And so Christy went through this process in the spring. We did a field test in 2 areas of the country, one in Kentucky and one in Oregon. We got excellent feedback from the teachers to help us guide the later implementation of this. And so Christy has some wonderful thoughts about what it was like to do that. And so I'm excited that she's here to share with you all today. So Christy, you want me to stay on this slide, or would you like for me to move the slide?
I think we can go to the next slide. Okay, the tracking form. So this is a tracking form that we filled out for one of the friends in our classroom who participated in the field test. And the tracking form, there's a version that you can download in the webinar. This is a very concise summary of the skills, level of instruction, and then the routines and activities in which you can teach that skill. And I think recording this information just helped me be very aware of the skills that we were going to teach each child, how we wanted to teach the identified skills, and where we would teach them during the school day. Yeah, and we tried to make sure that we were hopefully teaching in activities that the children enjoyed, because then they're interested and they would be more likely to participate in the activity.
And you completed this after you did the AEPS-3 assessment with them,
Yes,
right, Christy?
I'm sorry. That was the first part, was getting permission from the families for the children to participate in the field test study, and then completing the AEPS-3 with those children in the classroom. And so we also thought about our universal teaching strategies. We monitored these once a week during the field test study, which was very feasible, but it was also just a nice reminder of the recommended practices that we wanted to use with all of the children throughout the day in our classroom and anywhere else on the playground, just throughout the school day. And this paperwork, it did take a little bit of time, but it was so helpful. And it just helped us stay very conscious of what we were working on with the children in the room. The embedding schedule was another way to look at the skills that we wanted to teach throughout the school day. So this is one that I filled out, and I just thought about what our day looks like, the identified goals for each child, things I could do in each activity, as well as specific teaching strategies that I could use. And that was really helpful, just thinking about the different instructional strategies that we could use. And there is a list of those included, which was very helpful. I think it just helped. Go ahead, Jennifer. Sorry.
I was just going to say, so these strategies came from the activity plan, didn't they?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And I think it was just a good way for us to think about the learning opportunities and think about how we could elicit the skills based on our knowledge of the child and the child's interests. Okay, so the specialized instruction. This is, a priority skill, and when thinking about this, it was a skill that was just, we really were hoping the child would make progress on throughout the whole day. And in filling out this form, thinking about how we would get the child's attention, how we would respond to the child's behaviors, what would we do after the child responded. It helped us be more intentional, more consistent with our instruction, our interactions. We were more consistent with the responses to the child. And this was monitored 2 to 3 times per week. So we could see pretty quickly if the interventions were effective or if maybe we needed to make a change to help the child make progress towards the identified goal.
I'm gonna walk them through your example.
Sure. So this is pretty important skill in a preschool classroom, or any classroom, I guess, follows one-step direction with contextual cues. So I just thought about when we would probably do this. Chose free choice time, going on the child's interest. Let the child choose the activity. So I'm meeting the child in the classroom where the child's at, just using the available classroom materials. I like how it points out that you have to establish joint attention. So I want to just join the child at the activity. I don't want to just sit there and watch the child. I want to actually be present and be engaged with the child. You can specify, what you're going to say to the child, and then make sure you specify the wait time so you're consistent with that also. And then if the child follows the direction within 5 seconds, then you give the specific reinforcement. Thank you for cleaning up. You're helping take care of our room. And then if the child, keeps playing or runs away from the group on the playground, does not respond, scatters the toys, these are just things that we had seen happening, but it was important to outline those incorrect responses so everybody's on the same page. Then how is the adult going to respond to those incorrect responses? Provide the direction again, but shorten the phrase so you're not using as many words. Use sign language. You can specify, like, okay, pick up 5 blocks, or hand over hand assistance, some type of gentle physical guidance to help the child follow the direction. But it just helped us know what we wanted to do, how we wanted to teach it, and how we were going to respond to the child. And then this was for the focused instruction. So this was with these focused, with the focused instruction, we collected data on this once a week, and we collected data on the developmental sequence leading up to the child's identified goal. So we would have, for writing and drawing using mixed strokes. I mean, we have these materials available in different areas of the room, but having prepared this paperwork, the embedded schedule, the tracking form, the progress monitoring form, I'm more conscious of this child's goals, how I want to interact with the child while the child is doing the activity, and be sure to look to see if the child is making progress towards that overall goal of using mixed strokes while drawing. So that would, it was very feasible to take data on that once a week for the focused instruction.
Christy, do you have any overall comments about the time that you used the AEPS-3 curriculum? Any overall thoughts?
I liked the paperwork beforehand, and then using it in the classroom, it was a part of our room. It was just embedded within the room. The activities, it were things that we could plan just during our day. The data sheets were already ready, so I knew the goals, I knew the activities, I knew how I wanted to teach it, and it was just then it's monitoring it. So it fit in really well with our school day.
Thank you, Christy. And so, I mean, a couple of words about the curriculum validation study is that the teachers and early intervention providers that participated in the study all said that the curriculum helped them, again, be more intentional about focusing on the skills. They really liked the embedding schedule. And as I was saying, I was sharing this information with someone yesterday. And I think a lot of times we've been using embedding schedules for a long time, but oftentimes what we do is that we just focus on, you know, coming up with the skills and coming up with the activities. But in those corresponding blocks, we don't necessarily identify the teaching strategies that we're going to use. And so, it's a different way of thinking about how we can really focus our instruction on, you know, exactly what particular intervention that we're going to use to teach during that skill, during that activity. And so across the board, all of them really felt like that was helpful. Many of the early intervention providers that were part of the field test indicated they thought that that was something that they could use with the family to support them and help them understand how to embed the skills within the activities. I think that there are many aspects of the curriculum that could be used with families so that they could get ideas about, you know, how do they make you know, a family outing, how do they make it work better for them? Or, you know, how can they engage their child in an art activity at home? Because the activities are set up so that they could be implemented across environments. And so I think that we've gotten some initial good feedback on it. I think that the fact that it is, it's very, very much focused around what we call a recommended practices for early childhood. You know, it's you know, setting up your environment, using early learning, you know, using learning centers, using hands-on materials. It could work with other practices, sets of practices that people are using, kind of regardless of what kind of program that they are engaged in. And so it's again, the curriculum is not one where it's going to tell you on Monday morning, you know, you're going to do an all about me theme. And, you know, this is the, you know, the activities that you're going to do for an all about me theme. It's not that kind of curriculum. It's not a, you know, a curriculum where it tells you exactly, you know, what your schedule is going to be. It's really focused around, you've identified these goals for these children, and then based on identifying these goals, it helps you know how to teach them. And to me, that's really what a curriculum should be about, is helping you provide better instruction. And so I think that in the end, it will be more helpful than many of the canned curriculums that some programs are presently using. So this kind of, Christy, anything else you want to add to what I was saying about that?
No, I don't have anything. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Well, this is kind of concludes the amount of time that we were supposed to take. So I see that Amy is back on here, and so she will do some concluding, and then we'll have an opportunity to answer some questions.
Yes, thank you, Christy, and thanks, Jennifer, for sharing your experience with the curriculum and an overview of the curriculum. So as Jennifer said, we'll take questions in just a couple minutes, so you can go ahead and put those in the question box. I just wanted to let everyone know this is a picture of the AEPS-3 complete kit. You'll see the curriculum volumes are the orange, the blue, and the green volumes over here on the right-hand side of your screen. The kit is publishing at the very end of November. So if you've pre-ordered, we're expecting people to receive their kits by mid-December. The kit here is $4.99. As soon as that includes the test and the curriculum and the forms and a USB with all of the files, like that embedded schedule form that Christy showed, and the intervention planner on that USB so you can print them. And the next slide, I think we have a free shipping discount that you can use through the end of the year if you're interested in pre-ordering you can use any of the AEPS-3 materials. You also can buy all the materials individually. So if you are interested in just using the curriculum, you can buy those curriculum volumes individually. I wanted to let everyone know that we have 2 recordings available for the other webinars that were in our series. So Diane Bricker and Nancy Miller gave an introduction to the whole series, to the whole link system, talked about all of the changes. And then a couple of weeks ago, we had a webinar on the new Ready Set tool, which is this a measurement of school readiness skills for 4- and 5-year-olds. So you can watch those recordings at the link below, and we'll put this link, we can put that in the chat box for you as well. And then I also wanted to encourage everyone to sign up for our AEPS newsletter. We send our newsletter every couple months, and it has all the information and free samples, free articles and tips. So it's definitely a good resource to use if you're interested in AEPS or you're an AEPS user. So I encourage you to sign up for that. And just one more reminder for everyone to fill out the short survey. We really do appreciate all of the feedback that you share, and we will be selecting one person who completes it to win a free book. And then for those of you who are watching the recording right now, this next slide has a URL where you can go and get your certificate for watching this webinar, and that'll be a certificate you can download, and then you can fill in your name and the date you watched it. And for those of you who are listening live, this certificate, you can download it now in the handout section, and it also will be in a follow-up email that you're going to receive tomorrow. And you also can, of course, jot down this URL that's on your screen if you'd like to do it that way. So now we are going to take some questions, and I'll start off by saying that this webinar is being recorded, and you'll receive a recording in your email tomorrow, and you're welcome to share that with colleagues who might be interested in seeing it. Okay. So we're getting some more questions of people who've pre-ordered their sets. So it's going to start shipping at the very end of November. So depending on where you live across the country, by mid-December, you should have your kits if you've pre-ordered. Let's see. We're getting a question, is it available in Spanish? So the forms and materials that are for families and the child observation data form, which is the test form where you record all the child's results, is available in Spanish. The curriculum materials, the books themselves are in English. I think the form, Jennifer, some of the forms to help you implement the curriculum might be available in Spanish, but the books themselves are in English. Let's see. So, Christy, we have a question from a listener who, does your program use response to intervention? And if so, how did the curriculum work with a response to intervention system?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. So I don't use RTI that frequently in the classroom, but I feel like this would work with that.
Okay.
I feel like with the frequency of the data collection, you are seeing if the children are responding to your intervention that you're doing in the classroom activity, see if your instructional strategy is working or if you need to modify.
I mean, this is going to be a bias on my part, but, you know, from what I've seen of people implementing response to intervention, I mean, there's oftentimes not enough intentionality in the implementation of certain interventions. And so, you know, this would allow you would have, you know, all your interventions. These are evidence-based interventions that are, you know, in early childhood. They're listed in this curriculum. And so, you know, I feel like if you're intentionally choosing the intervention and then intentionally collecting data on the skill, like Christy said, that it could be very useful for that purpose. We really, really try hard, and we've done this in our work with the vision of early childhood in our position paper of differentiating between RTI and MTSS. But certainly it's a reality that that programs have to sometimes address issues around RTI, and so a lot of that RTI stuff, as Christy said, has to do with data collection, and so the progress monitoring advice that I think you get from this could be very useful.
Okay.
And we'd love to work with programs who are interested in trying to figure that out.
Okay, so we have Jennifer, we have a listener who's saying, particularly in the state of Minnesota, they're told that the AEPS is not a curriculum. How would you recommend helping others recognize that it is a curriculum and that it can be used that way?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we didn't do a really good job with the second edition. There's been so much focus on the AEPS as being a test. And so that's one of the reasons why we really put a lot of effort into the third edition, creating a curriculum that is in many cases could stand alone. Now, I don't know why you would want to do a different test and do the AEPS curriculum, but, I think it's, it would certainly be, because it's linked. I mean, that's what a curriculum-based assessment is that it's linked, where you link the assessment items it's teaching to the test. And so, which I know is a dirty word, but it still is essentially what you're doing. You're identifying what children can teach. And I think that, I don't know how, especially in the current version, I don't know how anyone could deny that the curriculum that we've developed for the third edition is not a curriculum, because it has all of those elements. It has a scope and sequence, it has activities, has teaching strategies, it has a progress monitoring system, and so it seems like to me that it would be undeniable that it would be a curriculum at this point.
Okay, thank you.
I think a lot of the training and a lot of the effort, that we with the second edition was around, just getting people to use the test, because it's relied on and used so heavily for accountability and other purposes. And so I'm hoping that we can emphasize the curriculum more now.
So Christy, we have a listener asking, could you estimate the prep time that you needed to prepare the data sheets for the children?
Now that is something I should have collected data on. I would think, I would say just looking at in talking with the families about their priorities for their children, does this include doing the assessment or just the paperwork?
I think maybe just the planning part. Like, did you do it at the beginning of the week or every day? How?
Well, it was a couple hours to start, just with like the embedding schedule, the tracking forms, and this was for 3 children. A couple hours with, I think that's a good estimate, tracking form, embedded schedule, and then the data sheets. But once I had the data sheets, those were in the classroom, very easy to use. I just copied them.
Okay. So kind of like there was some initial setup, but then once you
there is some initial setup, but I think that just helps with your planning and your intentionality, your focus. Yeah.
Okay.
And remember that Christy was participating in this as part of a field test. So we didn't ask them starting out for the first time to do it with every child in their classroom. So we wanted to see how it was going to work with a child who had a diagnosed disability, a child that was at risk, and a child who was typically developing. And so it was just beginning to use it, I think. So.
We have a listener asking about using the curriculum to support early intervention, so routines-based intervention or family guided. So was the Oregon site, were they an early intervention site?
They were, all of them were, and so they were providing home-based services to their children, And I think the only thing I will say that they got kind of hung up on is that when you're using, like, if you're using a routine-based interview, the typical routine-based interview, that you identify the routines families are interested in. And so they had a little bit of a struggle, like seeing the connection between if the parents said that they wanted to work on their child going to Walmart. There's not a Walmart routine. There's not. I mean, or going to the playground or whatever. There may not be specific routines in the same words that the parents said, but if you look at those routines, what you see is that in the description of those routines, that it encompasses, something that's broader than what the label or the name of it is. And so once they got past that, then what they found, especially when they were looking at, the embedding schedule, that it was extremely useful in sharing information. And many of them, as happens in lots of states where they do a lot of coaching with families and they don't do direct services, then they were able to use the embedding schedule to coach families in how to implement the interventions with them. And they really liked that.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that information about EI. Let's see. We're getting some questions about AEPS-I and when AEPS-3 will be integrated in AEPS-I. So we are currently building a new AEPS-I system that will include AEPS-3. And so right now, the timeframe for that is expected to be available around April 2022. So if you're an AEPS-I user, we are soon going to be sharing more information with you about the transition plan and the timelines to transitioning to the new system. Programs will have, over the period of the next year or two, time to transition into that new system, and more information will be coming about that. But AEPS-3 will be available in a new system, not in the current system you're using now. So, okay. We have just one more second to see if we have any other questions come in. Let's see. We have a question about some training, what training options are going to be provided. We will be doing more webinars, so free webinars like today's webinar in the winter of 2022 and going forward, especially, and we'll be having like some demos of the new AEPS-I system to kind of orient people to the new system. There will also be live virtual training provided by the AEPS trainers, and we're also working on some online training options, some self-guided. We have the Inter-Rater Reliability module for the second edition that you can take now, and there will be an AEPS-3 version of that available. So the online self-guided modules will be at a fee, but we will have some more free webinars. And also, if you're interested in training tips about transitioning, I think the AEPS Newsletter is also a good resource. We'll be sharing some articles and tip sheets and interviews about transitioning, so that's a good resource for some free training as well. All right. Well, thank you to everyone for joining us, and thank you especially to Jennifer and Christy for sharing information about the new curriculum. And feel free, if you have questions, you can drop those into the survey at the end. So we'll get back to you with any additional questions people may have. So thank you, everyone. We hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.